Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nan Glaus, and I work here at the Parent Assistance Line, and I've spent about almost 20 years working for Child Abuse Prevention Services, and I am an Exchange Club member here in Tuscaloosa as well. And if you're not familiar with the Exchange Club, their national project is child abuse prevention. So I'm very invested in being a child advocate and preventing child abuse. My background before I got into prevention was working in psychiatric units and chemical dependency units and working with many, many victims. So whatever we can do to prevent a child from getting hurt spares them from having to spend the rest of their life trying to recover from that trauma. So today is just one little aspect. We're going to specifically focus on shaken baby syndrome. How many of you are familiar with shaken baby syndrome? Just a couple of you. That's not unusual. Statistics tell us that almost 75%, 50 to 75% of caregivers do not know about shaken baby syndrome. And it is so important to know about it because it is 100% preventable. So our program today is mostly PowerPoint presentation to give you as much information as we can. And we have some brochures that you can have. Some is about shaken baby syndrome from the Tuscaloosa Exchange Club, and a brochure about the Parent Assistance Line should you have any questions about raising children, or if you need brochures for either your personal life or your professional life, just give us a call and we can provide that for you. And we also have some brochures about child abuse prevention because they do very similar type of programs too, where they could come out to your agency and give trainings on child abuse prevention. I will also use the simulator dial to show you how quickly damage can occur to a young child. And I also have a video that is very impressive. There is a bit of a warning with the video. It is very emotional, but it's about 13 minutes long. And after that video, then I will allow some time if you have any questions. So I'll get started with our presentation. Shaken baby syndrome. It is 100% preventable. The definition of shaken baby syndrome is a form of abusive head trauma, but most of the time you'll see the initials SBS, shaken baby syndrome. It causes brain injury, bleeding over the surface of the brain, swelling of the brain, bleeding the back of the eyes, and other injuries. Now, a typical layperson's definition of shaken baby syndrome would simply be shaking the baby. The legal charges that are involved, as you see on the screen, are assault on a child, child homicide if that child should fail to survive. 25% of the babies who are shaken do not survive. The other 75% that may survive usually have severe brain trauma. In all cases of shaken baby syndrome, Child Protective Services are called, and other children that may be involved in the home or in the agency where the alleged assault occurred would be investigated to determine the safety of the other children. Shaken baby syndrome is not, it is a form of child abuse. It is not, well, there's a slide that will say it is not like a form of punishment type of thing. It is often ruled homicide or murder. If the child dies, it is from forceful, violent shaking, and it's usually a combination. It's not one single characteristic that determines. It's usually a series of characteristics that would give the diagnosis of shaken baby syndrome. It is not a form of punishment or neglect. It is not found among the effects of other forms of child abuse or accidental trauma, and that's the key, accidental trauma. Sometimes when shaken baby occurs, yeah, it could have been an accident in the sense that the parent or the caregiver did not realize that what they had just done could have been so deadly. In that sense, yes, it could be an accident, but they do not, they consider it an assault on a child and child abuse, not necessarily done by an accident, say like if a child tripped and fell type of thing. It is Not always, it says, is not always seen by bruises. You'll see in the video today, there's a father that speaks about, how could my child be on life support? Look at her, she's beautiful. There's not a bruise or a cut on her. It's just unbelievable that he may have to make the decision to have to pull the machines to keep this child living. It is not caused by car accidents or fall. And a lot of people ask, can you damage the child by throwing the child up in the air and catching them? We strongly don't advise that, because what if you do drop the child? All types of injuries can occur, of course. We should always be cautious with a fragile young baby. But even children older, you don't want to cause an accident. So we wouldn't recommend tossing in the air. But this in no way has any similarity, what we're talking about today, with that type of play. This is a vicious, violent shaking of the child. It is not caused by birth defects or genetic defects. It is 100% preventable. It is estimated somewhere between 1,200 and 1,600 cases of shaken baby syndrome occur each year. As I'd mentioned, 25% die, 75% have severe brain damage if they do survive. 60% of the shaken baby syndromes either die from their injuries at a later time, or they suffer lifetime disabilities. Between 55 and 70% of the perpetrators are male. Do you have any ideas? Why would you think that might be?
They don't have a bond because they don't carry children, so sometimes it's not natural for them to.
Yeah, they might not have as close of a bond as a mother or a caregiver might have. How do men tend to handle frustration?
With aggression.
Sometimes with aggression, yeah, if they don't have another way to be able to calm themselves down. So a lot of times that has something to do with it. They may also be under more stress because between their jobs and financial issues and that sort of thing as well. Expectations of being a man. Shaken baby syndrome is the most common cause of death. The younger the child, the more likely a head injury could occur. If you think about the muscles in their neck are not fully developed yet, so they are weaker when they are younger. But children up to the age of 5 have also been diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome. And I often tell people even an adult could be shaken enough to cause brain damage. And one example that I use is think about the people that we know that were professional wrestlers in the WWF. You have Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali, and many of them have brain difficulties after their career, and you have to wonder how much of that has been because of the tremendous blows in their profession. So as you can see on the PowerPoint, it does talk about 5- and 6-year-olds have been diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome, and even adults. The profile of a shaken child. Research shows that the victims have these common. They are typically less than 1 year old, but not always, but typically. The majority are under 6 months old, and twins have a higher chance of being shaken. And that's simply because you have, well, twice as much stress with a new change in your life, taking care of a new baby. Now, most shakers are male, as we talked about. They may be less familiar with babies' needs. They have more stress. They may not be used to a baby's crying, and sometimes people are, if they're out in public, they're very sensitive to their child crying and disturbing other people. But we want to reassure people that, everybody knows that babies cry. And it's okay for a baby to cry. Yes, we want to comfort them, and we do that all we can to get them to stop crying. But your ability to be a good mother or father has nothing to do whether that baby is crying or not. Most men who shake a baby are the biological father of the child or the mother's boyfriend. That's because most access and more frustration that may build up with that child as they see that child more often than others. Mothers, grandparents, anybody really is capable of shaking a baby if they lose control of their emotions and pick up that child when they don't know what else to do and violently shake this baby. Anyone who can become frustrated but they can learn how to calm themselves down and put that baby down and walk away and let the baby cry. No baby dies from crying. So these are activities that do not cause shaken baby syndrome. Falling, being bounced or jogged. Some people ask if they're jogging with the baby, if that could cause damage. This is not that type of shaking of the baby's head. The baby being tossed up and caught. The baby jerking in a car seat when the driver stops the car too fast. Those do not cause shaken baby syndrome. And you'll see when I do the demonstration, this is not a normal type of thing. A severely shaken baby can show some of these following signs. Not necessarily all of them, but this is like before, the slide that was talking about a combination. If there's 2 or 3 of these, then the chances of them being diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome is higher. So obviously the absence of being able to respond to stimulation, lethargy, convulsions, the inability to make sounds, the inability to track movement, difficulty breathing. They may be a little blue looking or dusky skin tone. They may be unconscious. They could have some type of vomiting. They're crying. If they are crying, it's usually whimpering type of thing. Their eyes may be rolling because this is a child that has brain damage. The long-term effects are, obviously, if they have survived, learning disabilities, cognitive disorders, blindness, cerebral palsy, trauma-induced seizure disorders, and loss of motor control. The less dramatic signs, unusual or unexpected sleeping patterns, eating patterns. If they are talking, slurred speech, or you can tell that something's not quite right, unexplainable or uncontrollable crying, the inability to be consoled. And why is the baby so easily hurt? As I was saying earlier, the baby's neck muscles are not as developed. And think about, in a baby's brain, their brain, even though they've been born, they're still developing up to the age of 26. So there's a lot of room in the skull for this baby's brain to grow. So a very young baby, their brain, the video does an excellent job explaining this. Adults have projections that kind of hold their brain in place. In a baby, those projections are not there yet. And virtually there's more room in the skull for that brain to move around. So you can imagine if your brain is being slammed up against the skull, there's going to be damage. And if it's causing bleeding, there's not much that the medical profession can do to stop the bleeding. So they have very delicate veins and nerves, and if those get torn from the skull, that's not easily repairable. Why do people, shake a baby? Well, I can guarantee to you nobody wakes up in the morning and say, what am I going to do today? Well, I think I'm going to hurt my child. That never happens. This is usually done out of frustration. The baby is crying and crying, and we do everything that we know to try to console that baby, check that baby if the baby is wet, or if the baby is hungry, or if the baby has a fever. And you go through your list of what you think could be causing the baby. When nothing else works and the baby keeps crying and crying, your frustration can grow and grow to the point you don't know what to do, and you may be tempted to pick up that baby and shake the baby. So it's a matter of someone losing control of their emotions. Sometimes the triggers, the secondary triggers, may be over toilet training. It could be that the baby is not being very cooperative. Older children in their terrific twos. I know you've heard of them referred as terrible twos. That's usually before the age of 2. Very young. They're not always able to express their needs or wants with words. So a caregiver is guessing a lot of times what they need or what they want. But you may be very frustrated with them if you can't figure out what it is that's causing their fussiness. So also too, if a baby is sick, or I also talk about if you have another child in the family home that has a chronic illness, that stress and frustration dealing with that child can spill over to another child when they're having an unusual event. So what does it cost if a child has been shaken? Well, obviously with the slide it talks over $150,000 per visit. You consider it cost over a couple $1,000s a day in a hospital. I'm sure that it's much higher than that. Now consider the ongoing treatment for whatever this child's been diagnosed with, what their problems are. That can go on for a lifetime. The child's loss of their childhood and of course their adulthood later. You will see that in the video. A mother will talk about how her child is never going to be able to go to the prom. She's never going to see her little girl get married someday. So it's not just the loss of childhood, but as an adult as well. Think also the effect on other family members. When you have a special needs child, it affects every member of that family. So a loss of a sibling and all the attention that that other sibling is going to lose because so much care and concern is taken care of the injured child. And then, not to even mention the education costs to try to help this child as much as they can so that they can become as able to care for themselves as much as possible. All depends on what happened in that brain and what their skills and abilities are. So that's why we're here today to talk about prevention. All of this is 100% preventable. If people realize what could happen in just those few seconds, they probably would not pick up a child and shake the child. So why do babies cry? Well, obviously you all are caregivers. You know they cry for all kinds of reasons. And there's just a few of these listed on the screen. They're hungry, or they have gas in their stomach and need to burp. Maybe they need something in their mouth just to suck on and to soothe. Maybe those teething pains. Getting sick or cranky. You know, we all get cranky when we're sick, right? With a baby, they're not able to express that. So it comes out by crying. Maybe they have a physical uncomfortable, like a diaper rash or something like that. That can cause that. And sometimes, too, a baby may cry because they're overstimulated. I've often seen a lot of times babies, if you're going through a big crowd and they're in their stroller, they'll fall asleep. And that's one way that their body is helping them cope with overstimulation. This slide talks about even more reasons that babies cry, and a lot of it has to do with their bodily discomforts. And you can imagine what it's like in a child who has colic. So it is more demanding on a caregiver to take care of a colicky baby. And then add to that the stress of having other children, if that baby has siblings too, and trying to keep up the usual routine of making meals and making sure clothes are clean and everybody's taken care of. The frustration can easily build. Now, there's also a time in a child's life, about 2 months old, that we really don't know why they cry. It's called the purple period. And that stands, it's a coin, an acronym that means peak, unpredictable, resistant, painful looking, lengthy, and evening crying of a typical healthy baby. So sometimes babies just cry to cry. And we've all heard of babies who will just cry themselves to sleep. And maybe sometimes that's a release of stress. Maybe that's how some babies get to sleep for a little while. So again, back to the statement that I made earlier, you should not judge yourself as the quality of you being a parent by whether or not your baby is crying, because all babies cry. And we may or may not know the reason why they cry. So this kind of explains that acronym, the peak and the frequency and duration, about 2 months of age or so, but that's not always, some children develop at different times. If you have a preemie baby, it may be later. So, but just be aware that all children might have a period of time where you don't know what's going on with them, but they're totally healthy and you've taken care of their needs, and it is okay to just lay them down and let them cry for a little bit. It's okay. Crying during this time is unpredictable, can stop and start without the obvious reasons. No matter what you do, they're resistant. They may appear to be in pain, And all we can do is the best things that we know to try to, if we think they're in gas, patting them or rolling them a little bit, all those things that you all do to try to help the baby. But if it doesn't work, then you try to do something else. But again, put the baby down for a little while. It could also be that some children don't want to be handled, and it could be a reason that they're crying because they, again, overstimulation, just need to be put down for a little while. So this crying can also be very lengthy, though. They could cry for hours. They could cry all day. So that's why it's very important for a caregiver to have a support system, have somebody they could call. And like if they're calling you, to be conscious of that and to always offer to help them out in some way. Hey, I'll come over for a while. You go take a walk around the block. Or go take a bubble bath. And I'll watch the baby for a while. Those are all really good things to help others. And late afternoon and evening is a very typical time for babies to cry. And we don't always know why. And of course, that's the time it seems like they're crying the loudest. And maybe it's because in our mind we know our neighbors are home from work and they hear the baby crying. So that puts more stress on you. So the next slide is talking about coping skills. Certainly anger management is a big thing. Do you know what to do? What are some healthy ways to deal when you feel anger and frustrated? Are you even aware that you are feeling anger? Can you say, oh, okay, I need to calm down now. I'm just real frustrated right now. And sometimes that even helps your family. You have other little siblings around or other children around. You can express that so they can also learn, oh, mom, or oh, my babysitter's feeling kind of frustrated right now. And they can identify that face, how you're looking, tenseness, and that sort of thing. They learn from you as well, too. And more importantly, they're watching what you do to respond to that. What do you do to calm yourself down and keep everyone else calm? Because if you're frustrated or full of anxiety, those kids pick it up fast. And sometimes they mirror what you're feeling, and it can make things worse. So obviously, discipline. You need to have some forms of discipline. What are positive ways? Discipline means to teach and to guide. It does not necessarily always mean corporal punishment. A lot of people, when they hear the word discipline, they think corporal punishment. But there are hundreds of ways for discipline, and many of them are very positive. And for very young children, the most popular form of discipline is simply getting them away from something that they shouldn't be into. Distraction, that is a discipline technique. Considering knowing your ages and stages of children. What is a typical normal behavior for a 2-year-old? Would you need to be fussing at them if they're going through a stage they should be going through? And of course, the importance of nurturing. No matter how frustrated you feel, you have to have the ability to be able to nurture others around you. So this slide talks about checking the baby's basic needs. And this is where parent education classes come in. If you have a parent or someone who does not know a lot about parenting, it is a strong parent and a healthy parent that can take classes, whether they're online or at your local agency that provides them, that shows strength to take classes to learn. Just like if you want to learn French, you take a French class, right? So it doesn't mean that you have had to hurt a child or abuse a child to take classes or to look up online. And here's the other thing, it's a little bit of a plug for the Parent Assistance Line. If you don't know what to do, you have a phone call, or you can go on their website, and it's full of information raising children and techniques and ways to help whatever your challenge might be that day. So in our world today, we do have handbooks out there online. There are ways. If you don't have somebody to call, you can call the Parent Assistance Line. You can get information on how to best cope with whatever you're being challenged with. But obviously we know, is the baby hungry? Is the baby wet? Is the baby too hot, too cold? Is their body feeling, kind of comfortable? Are they overtired? So often you go to Walmart and you hear those babies crying. You look at what time it is and you think, should those kids even be out at this time? So sometimes parents don't realize that by their routines and taking their children out of those routines, that can cause enough stress and anxiety in a child to cause unwanted crying? Is the baby bored? Sometimes children cry because they're bored and they need a little bit of stimulation, whether it's music or somebody just playing peekaboo or having something pretty and nice to look at. Okay, so now let's talk about the ways to soothe a baby. Obviously, they like soft, gentle noises. That's why music is so popular. Showing the baby new things to look at. If you're tired of holding the baby this way, turn the baby the other way so they can see their environment. Rocking the baby very gently, putting the baby in a new position, carrying the baby around as you do chores or whatever. Sometimes taking the baby for a ride in the car, a lot of times will soothe them. I have a neighbor who puts her child in the car and drives up and down the street to get that child to take a nap every day. Whatever works for that particular child. It's only temporary. It's not going to be forever. It's just while they're going through this little phase. So even running something like a vacuum cleaner, something that sounds monotonous, is something that can bore the child and put the child, to calm them down and to put them to sleep. So if frustration builds, you ask yourself, have I tried all those things I know how to soothe the baby? Is the baby safe? Am I being a good caregiver? Am I calming down? Am I showing that I'm calm and soothing so this baby will pick that up? And ask yourself, where can I best put my energy right now instead of hurting this child? What can I do? Do I need to put the baby down and put some music on and dance for a while? Do I need to go outside in the backyard and just scream? Do I need to put the baby in the stroller and walk around the neighborhood if it's nice weather? Come up with a plan how you can cope with frustration when it's building. And here again is talking about just simple things that we teach most of our children in school. Count to 10. Count to 100 if you need to. Count backwards. Whatever it takes to focus, calm your breathing, and relax those tense muscles when you feel like making a fist. Say an alphabet or repeat your favorite poem. Read a passage in the Bible or whatever kind of book that will make you feel more calm. Take a warm bath or a shower. Just do something to take care of yourself so that you can better be able to take care of the baby. Always, of course, if you feel like you're going to pick up this baby and be unduly harmful, just put the baby down and walk away. Call a friend, call a neighbor, do something. It is okay to seek help. It's a strong, healthy person that realizes that they don't have to do everything all by themselves. And everybody needs a break once in a while. So remember, it is the child's job to cry. That is part of their early communication. And it is our job to cope with that crying. Always remember that no baby has died from too much crying, and never ever shake a baby. This is 100% preventable. So at this time, I would like to draw your attention to the simulator doll. And you can see that the doll has a clear skull, a clear head. And you can see there are some emblems. Like on the very back, you will see it's talking about vision. So the very first thing that typically happens to a child that is shaken, if there's damage in the back of the head, their vision is impaired. Blindness is a very common effect of being shaken. On the very front of the skull, this is what makes us human beings. This is our frontal lobe. This is where our executive functions are, our ability to control our emotions, to make decisions, to store our short-term and long-term memories. So it's very important that we protect our frontal lobes. And you will also notice on the sides it has a little foot and a hand, and that's talking about fine motor skills and gross motor skills. Fine motor skills are the ability to, say, pick up your pen. Gross motor is like being able to walk across the room using your whole body. And also, there is a little symbol up here that talks about being able to hear and to be able to use your voice. If damage occurs on those sides of their brain, it could cause deafness and their ability to speak. So, I want to do this demonstration with this baby. I'm going to turn this baby on, and the baby will stop crying. And I'm going to shake this baby as if I am aggravated and frustrated. I will warn you, this is kind of disturbing to see. But I think it is very effective when you see this, because I want you to kind of count in your minds. How many seconds does it take for me to get this baby to stop crying? Or how many times does it take for this baby's head to roll around? And I also want you to notice, you know, this baby doesn't have head support. I pick up this baby, I'm not supporting the baby's head as you would a young child. So watch what happens to the head as I am shaking the baby. Stop crying. Stop crying. Okay. How many seconds did that take? Probably less than 5, wouldn't you? Yeah. And what lights are lit up? All of them. I continued to shake. But did you notice the very first set of lights that went off? And that was because I'm shaking the baby with the baby facing me. If the baby's head is some other way, it could have been other lights as well too. But what happened to the head as I was shaking this baby? It was turning, wasn't it? That baby's head goes all over. So where do you think the damage is in this baby's brain? All over. If this baby's brain is bruised or torn, the nerves and blood vessels are torn from the skull, we can't fix that. Now, some babies, you know, they can regrow in some brain cells. You know, they're developing. But a lot of times nerves and brain and blood vessels cannot be repaired once they've been torn away from the skull. So this baby will have some type of damage if I did not kill this child. And another thing I want you to consider is I'm only 125 pounds. What if I was a 200-pound guy and I pick up this baby and I start to shake this baby? Do you think the damage could have occurred quicker, maybe? You'll hear in this video that I'm about to put on where the first mother, I think, is talking about how just by picking up the baby alone, he had broken ribs before he'd even incurred damage by shaking the baby. So.
From a local mother whose baby was allegedly shaken.
I said in his nursery, and I made the choice done again.
Doctors themselves spotted the signs of a shaken baby.
He shook her for 10 to 15 seconds.
The medical examiner today confirmed police suspicions in ruling that the baby was shaken to death.
Experts say it happens at least 1,500 tragic times every year. That's how many babies are violently shaken or slammed into something hard just to keep them quiet, just to get them to stop crying.
They grab the child around the chest and shake violently.
He broke 3 posterior ribs with his grip alone. She suffered a skull fracture. The last time she abused him, he was 11 weeks old. The first time he was 9 weeks old.
We didn't know what to expect. We knew she had a brain injury with her being normal, but we didn't have a clue, what her life would be like.
He took us in the room, closed the door, and said, "Your daughter is a victim of shaken baby syndrome."
That's when they said shaken baby syndrome, and I kind of went, huh? But, what is that?
Blood on the brain, tearing brain tissue, brain swelling, bleeding in the back of the eyes, retinal detachment, bone fractures, mental retardation, seizures, cerebral palsy, death. These are some of the tragic consequences of shaken baby syndrome.
It's not anything that can happen accidentally. It's not anything you're going to do in play. It's not the throwing them up in the air and catching them. It's, you know, we have parents worry, well, if I jog with my child in the backpack, if I'm riding horse, none of that's going to cause it. This is a very violent shaking with somebody who's lost it.
It was only 10 to 15 seconds, and it has had a lifetime of horrible consequences that cannot be undone, that cannot be fixed, that cannot be erased or, you know, said sorry for.
Medical support's a fight with the insurance companies. You know, medical companies don't pay anything for children with significant disabilities unless it's a runny nose or diarrhea. The school system is another fight because parents, you know, don't want their children in the same classroom with my son.
She has struggled really hard in school. I mean, she was, you know, several years behind her peers and just got all areas of learning, you know, just, you know, she only has 50% of her brain, but you know, she tries real hard and she just, you know, just really hard for her to learn and keep up.
The doctors and the CPS, the investigators said that she was by far the worst case they have dealt with to survive. That most shaken babies they had handled didn't make it.
It was so horrific. It's burned into my brain. I will never forget any of that day.
It's just more frustration.
She doesn't blow out the candles on her birthday cake because she can't. She's not gonna ride a bike. She's not gonna have a prom dress, you know. It's just a lot of stuff was taken from her. Things, you know, that I got to do that she's not gonna get to do, and that's just really sad. There were a lot of things that I was imagining that I would do with my daughter, and I just won't.
She was viciously assaulted, shaken, and beaten to death that day. Although she lingered for 3 days in ICU, she died because of abusive head trauma at the hands of her babysitter.
If you think something's wrong, don't let anyone ever convince you that you're wrong.
Babies aren't built to withstand violent, shaking forces that literally can rip the brain, often causing serious, even life-threatening damage.
And the way I kind of like to explain it is a baby brain's like unformed jello, or an adult brain's like jello fillers. So it sloshes more. And also in the baby's brain, there's actually more space between the brain and the skull than in an adult. So there's basically more slosh room. And the base of the skull, in an adult, you get projections up in your brain that kind of hold on to your brain. In a baby, it's flat. So basically what you've got is ungelled jello in a container, which is the skull, sloshing around and moving around.
When babies are violently shaken, not only are their brains injured, but blood vessels also break, causing bleeding between the brain and skull, and bleeding on the inside of the back of the eyes. Doctors look for this telltale bleeding to help figure out what someone did to a child.
She didn't have a bruise on her. That was so puzzling. I said, she looks perfect. How can she be in a coma? How can she be on life support? She looks fine. There's no cuts, there's no broken bones, there's nothing.
As a physician, that's what I help investigators figure out. Because sometimes it is. Sometimes whatever they're saying happened probably did happen and caused the injuries that we're seeing. Sometimes not. So if they're giving some history that there's no way, either one, the child developmentally isn't at an age where they could have done those things, or two, it's not consistent with the pattern of injuries we're seeing, they're caught.
Take a look at these families. Mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, victims. And each one, in their own way, has been touched and scarred by shaken baby syndrome. It's a syndrome that can be prevented. Preventing shaken baby syndrome is a concern of all of us. Educating all caregivers is important. Anyone who cares for a child needs to know that babies cry. It is the caregiver's job to cope with that crying, not stop the crying. If you feel like you're losing control, feel like you've got to shake your baby, stop. Walk away. Call someone. Breathe. Don't ruin your child's life as well as your own.
The most common trigger for abusing a child is crying. It's somebody whose coping skills, whose maturity level isn't there to deal with a crying baby. Babies don't have a lot of responses, that they can tell us what they want. Crying is it. They can't talk to you and say, hey mom, I'm hungry, or hey, I've got a wet diaper, it feels icky, or I'm just and fussy and just cranky. They can't tell you those things, so they're going to cry. And some babies cry more than others. And I think especially if you've got a baby with either medical problems or colic or those difficult to soothe babies, it's frustrating for any parent. Crying is frustrating for any parent when you don't know what to do for that baby.
Babies are going to frustrate you. Babies and small children. Everybody who raises a child to the age of 1 year, I think, has been to that point where they've been to the end of their rope, frustrated with that child. I think that's universal. And number one, you have to know that that's normal, and you have to prepare and have a way to cope with it.
Now the question is, what can you do to cope? What can you do to avoid the tragedies that we've just seen? The experts say, start with the basics.
Do they have a wet diaper? Do they have a dirty diaper? Does that need to be changed? Are they hungry? Feed them. Do they need to be burped? Purple. Do they just need to be comforted and need some tender loving care? Rock them. Some children will respond to motion. So go and ride around the block with them in their car seat. I've had some moms even just put them in a car seat on top of the dryer and run the dryer because the motion of the dryer would help them sleep. Whatever works for your baby, try those things. But if that doesn't work, and you've gone through the list, and you've tried everything, and you're about to lose it, put them in their bed, lay them on their back, make sure they're in a safe environment, and walk out of the room.
It's okay to let a baby cry. That shouldn't make you upset to the point of destroying a child's brain. It's okay to let a child cry. They have cries for myriad things, ranging from hunger to pain to loneliness to fear.
You put the child down and in a safe place, in a crib, a playpen, on the floor if you have to, as long as it's a safe environment. And you walk away, and you go outside, and you do what you need to do. You scream out in the middle of the neighborhood, or you call somebody. Call your neighbor. Just don't deal with the child. Just walk away.
Well, if babies cry, just cope. You need to cope with the situation and walk away or do what you have to do to prevent them from being in danger.
Everybody's entitled to a bad day, but it shouldn't end somebody's life.
Now, if all else fails, call a crisis hotline or even call 911. But for everyone's sake, please don't let what's building inside of you continue to fester. If you know or suspect an infant has been shaken, immediately seek emergency medical care. Time is very important when a child has been shaken. Even though there may be no outward signs, you need to get them medical care immediately. Please remember, you are not alone. People are ready and willing to help. For more information, call 817-882-8686 or log on to shakenbaby.com. I'm John Hammerly. Thanks so much for watching.